All right, so you've collected your data from your lab experiment, or you're going to use my data that's right here on, guess what? It's a Google Sheet called Lab Report Data. There are some options you can do. If you did a different experiment and you want to add your own data, that's fine. You can add your own data in a little section down here. You can replace the data that I have. That's fine also. If you want to do something with this data, say I want to calculate the average of my trials. In order to calculate the average of my trials, there's this little section here, and it says fx. That stands for function. I want Google Sheets to do a function. So I'm going to put a little equal sign. And guess what? Google can already figure out from the fact that I wrote average right above this that I want to do an average. So I would click on it, and it actually is figuring out I want the average of trial 1, 2, and 3. Now, if this was wrong in some way and I wanted it to like calculate a different column, I would just change this, like see where it says B3, I could change that to A3, and it would calculate this over here. But I don't want it to calculate that over there because that's not part of my trials, all right? So it calculates the average for me. Sometimes Google will pop up with another little window that suggests more things, like putting the average down here. If it doesn't pop up, notice see how there's this little bigger square right here? If I pull it down, it'll automatically fill in the rest of the spot with the average of, notice it says B4 to D4 because that is 4 right here. And I want B, C, and D. And then this one is B5 to D5. So 1, 2, 3, there's where we get 5, row 5, B, C, and D. And so I have my averages. So I know that the average weight or the average distance for 0 weights on the cup is 23.3. But if I don't want all of that on there, and look at it, it's 3 repeating, right? So it's on there forever. There's a little spot right here that says I can change my decimals. So I want less decimals. I can change it to less decimals. And so therefore I have a tenths place everywhere, except for 11. 11 doesn't have a tenths place. So if I want it to have a decimal like everything else, I could click that button and add a decimal. So now they all match. To make a graph of my data, I need to highlight what I want to make a graph of. So I just click in a corner and drag so that it highlights my little section. I'm going to go over here where it's called Insert Chart. When I click that button, it takes a second to think about it, and then it gives what it thinks the chart I want is. It gives me a line graph. Do I want a line graph? No, I don't want a line graph. I want a bar graph. So over here where it says Chart Setup, Chart Type, I'm going to change it to a bar graph. And so I have my trial 1, 2, and 3 in different colors. I have the weight on the cup, 0, 1, 2, 3, down here. I have my key right there. And then my title. Notice my title. That's a dumb title. That's not the title I would want for this kind of a graph. I would want it to say something like Newton's Second Law Lab or something like that, right? Please don't have like a generic title that's kind of, you know, graph. Don't call it graph. That's not okay. Now I accidentally clicked off somewhere, and so I need to click my little 3 dots right here, my little 3 dots, where it says Edit Chart, and it brings up this editor over here where I have this information, right? So I'm going to go to Customize. Right here it says Chart Axis and Titles, right here, my chart title. I don't want Trial 1, 2, 3. I want it to say Newton's Second Law Lab. And that's what's going to be there. Notice I'm missing something. I have weight on the cup here, but I don't have anything for what 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 mean. I need some kind of label for my y-axis. So here it says chart title. I can go down here to my vertical axis title, and I can add in, that was the distance in centimeters. And so now I have an axis title over there. That's a good looking graph. I could, if I wanted to make another graph, let's just move that one over here out of the way, say I want a graph of the averages, right? And not the trials in between. So now I have my averages, right? I have 4 different bars that have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But there's a problem. It doesn't say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just blank down here, right? And this says average. I don't want this to say average. I want that to say my distance in centimeters. So I can either double click and write right in there, or I can do like I did before and change it over here where it says vertical axis title. But I have a problem here. My horizontal axis doesn't have a title or any numbers. So I'm going to go here where it says setup and x-axis. And I'm going to want to add information to put there. I'm going to add this right here, the weight 1, 2, 3, 4 to add in. And there we go. Now it says 0, 1, 2, 3. I still don't have a little label there, so I'm going to switch back over here and add my title that says weight on cup. So now I have 2 graphs. I have one that tells me the average, which I should probably name that. So I have one that shows the average, and I have one that shows each trial. 2 different graphs that I can use. In order to put them into my lab report, there's a couple things. First of all, I want the actual data table in the lab report. So I am going to highlight this section, press Control-C for copy, go to my lab report, and press Control-V for paste. You have 2 options. Option 1, I can make sure that it's linked to my spreadsheet. That means anytime I change something on the Google Sheet, it'll automatically change it in my lab report. If I don't want it, like if I'm going to mess something up in my Google Sheet and I want to make sure my lab report stays the same, then I would paste it unlinked. But right now I'm going to keep it linked so that if I make any changes, it automatically reflects in my lab report. So there it is. There's my data table. And I'm going to add my couple of graphs. So I'm going to go here. I can either Control Copy or see my 3 little dots. I can press the 3 little dots and then press Copy Chart. Go to my lab report, Control V, and paste. There is my data in a graph. I can add my other graph. Doing the same thing, copy and paste. So now in my data analysis section, I have my data table, a graph of all my trials, and the average of the trials.